Good evening. Welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight.
You know, we're trying to change the behavior of voting.
Just how will mail-in voting work, or will it? We dive in.
You're really opening a can of worms.
Plus, Illinois GOP Congressman Adam Kinzinger echoes the president's concerns over mail-in voting. A top Illinois Democrat responds.
It's just a perfect storm of bad decisions.
The Census Bureau will stop in-person outreach a month early. Chicago Alderman react.
What will life, concerts, the workplace, and education look like in a post-COVID-19 world? A futurist and an epidemiologist weigh in.
As Mercy Hospital prepares to close next year, concerns about access to health care on the south side are resurfacing.
I'm Angel Ito, and I'll be taking you to the first mural in the city of Chicago featuring Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
A new banding station on the city's south side is spreading its wings to help save North America's birds.
And a Chicago musician makes good use of downtime while his father builds custom guitars. But first, big news ahead for Chicago Public Schools. Paris has more on that and other top stories from today. Paris.
That's right, Brandis. Sources are telling WTTW News that Chicago Public Schools plans to announce a fully remote learning plan for the fall. Last month, CPS proposed an initial hybrid model for the upcoming school year of some in-person and some remote learning, depending on the grade level. Now, this change in plans comes after CPS gathered feedback from parents, teachers, and administrators, and after multiple reports today that the Chicago Teachers Union could hold a meeting next week to potentially authorize a strike vote over CPS's safety plans. Now, it's unclear how the district's expected announcement will impact that vote. The union has demanded the school year start remotely to protect students and teachers from the spread of COVID-19. We'll have reaction to today's news a bit later in the program. Puerto Rico has been added to Chicago's travel advisory order, joining 22 states across the country. All visitors from the territory will be required to quarantine for 2 weeks starting Friday in an effort to stop the increasing spread of the coronavirus in Chicago. The move comes as Chicago Public Health Director Allison Arwady warned that local spread of COVID-19 is now happening primarily in households and at social gatherings.
I know that you feel safe when you're among friends that you know. It's easy to let your guard down, to not wear masks, to not social distance. But the problem is, as we're seeing cases increase, the risk is significantly higher. And as people are letting down their guard, they're out potentially contracting COVID and then bringing it back into households. So our Chicago data, by and large, the #1 risk factor is exposure within the household.
And Arwady says that Chicago is reporting an average of 273 new COVID-19 cases per day and has seen close to 62,000 confirmed cases in the city. That's as Illinois as a whole today reports almost 1,500 new coronavirus cases, bringing the total to almost 185,000. And the state is also reporting 19 additional deaths from the virus for a total of just over 7,500. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. We are 3 months away from the November election, but only 51 days away from when voters will be able to cast a ballot. This year, election officials are encouraging voters to do that by mail. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more on how that will work. Amanda.
Yes, Brandis, early voting isn't new, neither is voting by mail in Illinois, but this is going to be the first election cycle where officials are making a giant push for voters to cast their ballots by mail rather than in person at a polling place. This, even as President Donald Trump has cast doubts on making that switch.
Everyone knows mail-in ballots are a disaster.
State officials say Illinois, however, is prepared, and the state, in fact, is using federal money to help pay for an expanded voting by mail program. Some of you, however, have written in with some questions about how that's going to work. So we are here with some answers. We'll begin with the deadlines, like when are applications and ballots due? Now, the whole point of this push for early voting is to keep people at home, safe from the spread of COVID-19. So while November 4th may feel like quite a ways away still, actually things are already rolling when it comes to this mail-in ballot program. Illinois' new law that passed in the spring charges local elections authorities with sending vote-by-mail applications to anyone who voted in the past few statewide elections. So that means some estimated 4.5 million Illinois voters should automatically be receiving applications for a mail-in ballot in their own mailbox. Now, these should have been sent out by August 1st. So if you haven't already received one, well, look for one coming any day soon. Mind you, these are applications for mail-in ballots, not for the ballots themselves. If you do wait to turn in an application, the Illinois Secretary of State is supposed to send you another couple of opportunities, reminders for those applications. Those will be coming in September and then October. And then you fill out the application, a ballot is going to be mailed to you for you to then mail back in or to drop off in a drop box. You can also request one of these ballots yourself. You have until the end of October to do that. You can generally do that online. Now, State Board of Elections officials request that you do that ASAP.
This year, especially, we are urging voters, please, if you plan to vote by mail, please don't wait until the last minute to apply for your ballot.
Now, when you get that ballot, you can start turning in as early as September 24th, and you have to have it postmarked by Election Day. Other states do have different rules and different deadlines, but in Illinois, if it's postmarked by Election Day, it counts. Afterward, it won't. That does raise other questions, like what sort of stamps do you put on a ballot? And can the post office handle this surge? Well, the president has doubts there.
I don't think the post office is prepared for a thing like this.
Despite that, a USPS spokesman sent us a statement saying that the Postal Service is committed to delivering election mail in a timely manner, even despite its financial troubles, and that it is actively working with elections authorities to make preparations, including on things like how to design ballots and envelopes so they can be easily processed by USPS. Now, as for postage, in some jurisdictions, including Chicago, voters are going to be sent a prepaid envelope that they should mail their ballots back in. Now, in other places, the post office, in other jurisdictions, even within Illinois, that is, you're not going to get that. And the post office says in those cases, you do need to put stamps on your ballot. Matt Dietrich with the Illinois State Board of Elections says, on average, that's about $1.40. And
once you put that ballot into the mail, the Postal Service will always deliver it. They will always deliver it to the local election authority, whether or not there is postage due.
And likewise, elections authorities by Illinois law have to accept all ballots mailed to them. Now, as we started off talking about, you may have already gotten a vote by mail application from your local election authority already. But you may have gotten also a flyer that looks like this. Now, it can be confounding. Who else is sending vote by mail applications? And is it legit? The short answer, yes.
Outside groups are allowed to send applications. In recent elections, it's become a get out the vote tool.
This is done mostly by political campaigns. They have access to voter databases. One of the groups that is doing this, Vote Yes for Fairness. That's Governor J.B. Pritzker's effort to amend the state constitution. The campaign's director, Quentin Folks, says, yes, he does want that constitutional amendment to pass, but he says he's also working to change behavior for voters that are used to casting ballots in person.
And what my organization, as well as a number of other organizations that I talk to who are engaging in this sort of activity with these sort of programs, it's really important to make sure that we don't wake up on November 4th and only half of Illinois has voted. There's a lot of things that are going on, and the same, sort of information is similar to campaigns that were run around the census. These are things that have a lot at stake for us.
The flyers that folks' group is sending to mailboxes now don't even outwardly advocate for the graduated income tax change. The only mention of it really is in the return address and in the disclaimer saying who paid for the mailer. Folks says the endeavor is to make the whole vote by mail application process easier, more accessible. He says it's not meant to be facetious. Now, political campaigns on both sides of the aisle do this sort of thing. Again, it is legal, but Dietrich with the State Board of Elections says your best bet is still to stick with actual elections officials.
Every voter is best off to return their application to their local election authority. That way, it's going directly to the election authority. The election authority matches your application with the ballot they send you.
There are other questions surrounding this expanded vote by mail effort, like can county clerks handle this load? That's something that we plan to tackle on Chicago Tonight next week. For now, though, Brandis, back to you.
Amanda, thanks very much. And we will have more on mail-in voting with Congresswoman Sherry Bustos later in the program. Now back to Paris Schutz and what some Chicago aldermen have to say about the changes to the U.S. Census. Paris.
Brandis, the U.S. Census Bureau has confirmed reports that it's ending its count for the 2020 census on September 30th, a full month earlier than originally planned. The move prompted 4 past directors of the Census Bureau to warn many parts of the U.S. will not be accurately counted. And joining us with reaction to what Chicago communities might face are Alderman Andre Vasquez of the 40th Ward and Alderman Jason Irvin, who represents the 20th Ward. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so the Census Bureau is saying it's going to have a shorter time period now to collect all this data. We spoke with demographer Rob Perrell, who said Illinois is doing okay in its census count, but some parts are doing better than others.
You have neighborhoods in Illinois where 80 or 90% of the population has responded to the census already. And so the federal government just needs to do a little bit more work to get the remaining 10%. But then you've got all kinds of neighborhoods where only 30 or 40 or 50% of people have responded. And so you need to do a lot more work to reach people, convince them that it's safe to respond, and bring them up to 100%.
So a lot of these low response neighborhoods in Chicago. Alderman Irvin, what does this shorter time period now mean for the prospects of getting an accurate count in the city of Chicago?
Well, it greatly diminishes that possibility. Time is an enemy in this particular case. And so the more time we have, the better, given the fact that most communities on the south and west side are hovering around 45, 50%. That does not give us enough time to go through and get a fair and accurate count. So we would hope that the administration would change their position and move the timing back to October 31st, as was previously stated. Again, given everything that's going on right now, given less time to do the count is not going to help communities on the south and west side of Chicago, not just in Chicago, but nationally.
Alderman Vasquez, what are your concerns about a potential undercount, especially in your area that does have a sizable number of undocumented immigrants?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the point. Is even like if we look in the wards, we're doing relatively well. We're like 15 out of 50 as far as ranking with the census. But in the areas where we're not, up to the same level, it is where there's undocumented folks. It's where there's people who haven't had access to the system and support, and those who need it the most. So I would agree fully with Alderman Irving that we need that time, especially because of the times that we're going in, so that we have the resources and funding that's necessary going forward.
So there's multiple ways to do this. You can fill it out online. I did it online, and if you don't self-respond, then people are going out and helping you. Let's take a look at the map of the city of Chicago and the response rates. So in yellow and orange, those are the areas where it's a 50% or less response rate. As you said, Alderman Irvin, south and west side, how do you, in the time remaining, improve that in your communities?
Essentially, it's going to come down to knocking on doors. The biggest disadvantage that we have is that we do not know who has filled it out and who hasn't. We've asked the Census Bureau, can you just let us know the addresses of people that have filled it out so we can direct resources to those addresses that have not filled them out? And they told us no. They can say, well, we can give you a percentage. And again, it's like you ask somebody, are they registered to vote? They're going to tell you, yes, they're registered to vote. Just like they'll tell, oh, yeah, I filled out my census form. No, good and well that they haven't, because they feel that they don't want to feel like they're being left out of something. So people are going to give you the response that you want to hear. We need hard facts so we can go knock on the doors of the people that have not filled out the census and get them to fill out the forms so that we can have a fair and accurate count in the city of Chicago.
So it's kind of like a guessing game right now. Alderman Vasquez, can you get those relevant statistics or information from the Census Bureau? Who's been counted, who hasn't?
No, I mean, it's been a challenge really to get that information. You can kind of get a general sense, like similar to the heat map that you're seeing, but to be able to get more in depth, that's the problem. And also, even if you're knocking on doors, that whole dynamic has changed because a lot of people aren't even going to answer the door because of COVID fears and everything else. So the challenges are really different, and we need more time to be able to solve them.
Alderman Vasquez mentioning the COVID fears. Are there also fears of going into neighborhoods where there are high violent crime and having volunteers knock on doors?
Well, part of that I disagree with, because we have members of organizations that are from these communities. And so they know who the players on the streets are. They know the good, the bad, the indifferent. So they know where to go, how to operate in the community. But when you send some untrained census worker in the West Garfield Park or into some communities on the South Side, they may not know where to go, where not to go, what doors to talk to. So it's a challenge. And so we have spent money as a city to do outreach. It would help the Census Bureau to get those same people that are doing outreach, that are familiar with those communities, to help census workers go door to door so that we can get a fair and accurate count. That's something that the Census Bureau is not allowing for, and I think that would be to the detriment of a lot of communities, not only in Chicago, but nationally.
So it's clear that volunteers should come from the communities. We're going to have to leave it there for now. We'll be back with Jason Irvin and Andre Vasquez to talk about the coronavirus and news that WTTW first reported this evening that Chicago Public Schools are expected to revert to an all-remote learning plan for the fall. But now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. It goes without saying that life as we know it has changed significantly as a result of COVID-19. But with a surge of coronavirus cases and no widespread effective treatment or vaccine just yet, changes like working from home and wearing masks could become the norm. Attending a concert or sporting event in 5 years could be different from pre-COVID days. And is telemedicine here to stay? Here to answer those questions and more are Dr. Allison Bartlett, a pediatrician and associate professor of the pediatric section of infectious diseases at University of Chicago Medicine, and Jerome Glenn, executive director of the Millennium Project, a global think tank of futurists, scientists, business leaders, and policymakers. Thanks to you both for joining us on Chicago Tonight. So
good to be here.
Jerome Glenn, let's start with you, please. Will our current, COVID work-life changes look similar in the future with virtual meetings and working from home becoming the norm?
Well, just like AIDS has not been cured yet, so we sort of adapted to it. So I assume we'll adapt to the current situation. It's basically accelerated a lot of trends that were already in motion. We were increasingly doing stuff online with Amazon and so forth, increasingly doing telemedicine, increasingly doing teleeducation. So all of this sort of tele-everything becomes accelerated and becomes more so. But you'll still have frontline workers. You'll still got people going to do garbage collection. There's still going to be people on deliveries trucks and hospital workers and so forth. So you still have a mix of people that can't really work at home, and they'll have to do all the safety precautions that the doctors have been telling us about. But
and
then
Dr.
for
Bartlett,
the rest of us, we can do work at home as much as possible.
And Dr. Bartlett, what about healthcare? Is telemedicine, telehealth care here to stay somehow?
I think it really is. I think like Jerome said, it was in the works. It was on everyone's 5-year plans, and those 5-year plans turned into 3-month plans when
Right.
COVID hit. And there's some very significant advantages to having telehealth, but we'll also need to learn to be smart about when patients need to be seen in person and when the right time for telehealth is.
Could there be some form of at-home testing in the future?
So I think at-home testing or using more remote laboratories that are not at the medical center where you seek care definitely can be something that's on the horizon. A lot of the blood tests, though, will be a little trickier to do at home.
Okay. Jerome Glenn, what about large sporting venues and music events? Will they continue to be different in the future, and how different? Because for now, many of them are just altogether canceled. What are they going to look like down the road?
Well, I assume that a lot of people will figure out how to make spacing possible and have, as 4 or 5 shows at a time and have different people going in and out. But the idea of life more online and hence entertainment more online, it just becomes more culturally normal. It's very hard to imagine for some years. I mean, we may not get to, the doctor can tell us, but I assume we wouldn't get to herd immunity for at least 5 years or so. So, I mean, later on, we maybe have these crowds, but you got to follow the rules now.
Dr. Bartlett, is there going to be a post-COVID life, or could there be another pandemic on the near horizon?
So there will be a post-COVID life or a post-acute COVID life. It's not going to go away, but I think with vaccination and treatment and some of the methods that we're using for social distancing now, we will be able to control it. But there's definitely a risk for another pandemic out there, as long as there are increasing numbers of people who are encountering animals in crowded situations and the virus adapts. And then with global spread of humans, there's your next pandemic.
Yep.
Jerome, Glenn, what about, as long as we're talking about the global spread of humans, what is travel going to look like? Are we going to be spending more time doing regional and local travel versus foreign travel in the future?
Well, as a guy who spends half his life traveling around the world, and that stopped immediately when this thing happened. However, Emirates Airlines and some other ones are having rapid testing. So you get on the plane if you pass, and if you don't get on the plane, if you don't pass. I assume people are traveling right now, as you know, on airlines. But I'm stuttering because I would be a little nervous, and yet the air cleaning I understand on a plane is better than, say, on a train. But I suspect an awful lot of business travel will be cut back. I mean, I'm doing a lot of talk on video now, and I assume that's going to continue. But we will still travel, but probably not as much for some time, and certainly spaced and testing will have to be done all over the place.
And Dr. Bartlett, there are some people who are suspect of vaccines and they've got their reasons. And then there are some others who are worried about the efficacy and the safety of a vaccine that seems to have been fast-tracked. So if we do have a vaccine and if not enough people are receiving it, what are our chances for getting to herd immunity?
Well, we don't know what level of herd immunity we need, and it may not be a very relevant topic. So influenza happens every year despite vaccinations and previous immunities because it's not long lasting. Vaccination, hopefully for those who receive the vaccine, will prevent them from getting the illness or at least getting less sick than they otherwise would have. But we don't know enough about how durable immunity is to know whether we're going to benefit from herd immunity. This is not something like smallpox that we are going to eliminate completely.
Okay, time will tell. My crystal ball is in the shop, or I could have told you guys everything that I know. Meantime, my thanks to Jerome, Glenn, and Dr. Allison Bartlett. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're most welcome.
Thanks.
One of Chicago's oldest hospitals is set to close next year. Last week, Mercy Hospital and Medical Center announced plans to shut its doors by next June. Earlier this year, it formed a Southside coalition with 3 other hospitals in the area. They had planned to merge into one healthcare system, but the merger was disbanded in May when the coalition didn't receive necessary funding from the state. Now, concerns of a health desert on the South Side are resurfacing as residents prepare to find a new provider. Joining us now with more are Dr. David Ansel, Senior Vice President for Community Health Equity at Rush University Medical Center, and Deborah Harris, Executive Director of Action Now and Action Now Institute, a civic engagement nonprofit that works on the South and West Sides. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight. Deborah, let's start with you, please. What does the closing of Mercy Hospital mean for residents who rely on that hospital?
So we're basically looking at what we're going to do as far as our immediate healthcare needs because of COVID and just the longstanding healthcare needs that arise in the Black community, Black and Brown community. And so we're really just kind of at a loss, like what comes next, and are there substantial plans for what comes next that people can understand and really trust?
So the nearest hospitals for residents to go to instead of Mercy, as we can see on this map, they will either be Provident Hospital of Cook County, which is 3 miles away, or University of Chicago Medical Center, which is 4 miles away. Dr. Ansel, how will this distance affect health outcomes?
Well, you know, it's a tragedy that this is happening. We already have among the largest life expectancy gaps in the country are in Chicago. And while health and healthcare are not all of it, is certainly part of it. Access to healthcare, meaning easy access, is a critical piece of this. The ER at Mercy is one of the busiest in the city with 44,000 visits, I think about 1,800 deliveries. And people are just in need, are going to find themselves not close enough when they need care. So that's, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy to the history of Chicago, to the doctors. It's a tremendous hospital, but largely to the community that's going to now find itself in a healthcare desert.
In a statement, the president of Mercy Hospital and Medical Center, Carol Schneider, said, quote, "The decision to discontinue services at Mercy Hospital was not an easy one, but patients on the South Side have unmet needs within the current system. The transformation from an inpatient model to one with greater access to outpatient services will better address the disparate outcomes in health from which our community suffers today." Deborah, will outpatient care, will it fill the community members' needs for health care?
I don't believe it will. And I think when people make decisions about, you know, having like a holistic approach to healthcare versus like subsidizing to like outpatient, people need to actually know what that means. People need to actually know that the uninsured can still go there, that there will be some form of trauma services there, that there be, you know, they could still use their, if they have Medicaid and Medicare, those insurances there. So I think people really need to understand like what that means, and that needs to be spelled out. And that doesn't necessarily mean that every healthcare need will be available at an outpatient center.
Now, this closure also comes, you know, as we all know, that Black and brown communities in particular are being disproportionately affected. They are contracting and dying of COVID-19 at disproportionate rates. Deborah, what does the timing of this closure mean for those communities?
I think the timing just was careless. I understand that it was a hard closure. I can even kind of understand that, you know, monies weren't there, but something should have been done, especially during a pandemic where we don't know the foreseeable future, to make sure that that hospital stayed open, or there was at least a direct plan of action to address that, and even supplement some of the needs we're seeing because of COVID in the community, like extra sites for testing and things of that nature. So it definitely comes like as a blow, considering that they haven't released immediate next steps plans that will address potential increase in cases, potential increase in possible deaths because of this.
Mercy Hospital is the third in a string of hospitals in the Chicago area to close. The others are Metro South in Blue Island and Westlake in Melrose Park. Those both closed earlier this year. Dr. Ansel, a couple of things. You know, what does this trend of closures tell you? But also, why aren't some hospitals on the South Side able to sustain themselves?
Well, you know, the way we finance healthcare in the United States is upside down. And it's not based on community need, it's based on profits, unfortunately. And those places that are profitable, that make a margin, are able to stay open. But if you take care of poor people or people who are underinsured or very sick people, it turns out COVID was not good for the health of any hospital in the city, because you make money off of orthopedic surgery and elective procedures versus taking care of the sickest patients. All three of these hospitals serve Black populations in Black neighborhoods. And as part of when people talk about structural racism, so we've had this, I call it the trifecta of COVID, disproportionate deaths in Black communities and Black people, then Black Lives Matter movement, the police murders, and now the unemployment that's going to come as a result of COVID and everything else, targets the exact same communities and puts a tax on Black people who now have to seek care, have to go further. So those in greatest need, who need it the most, and should have a hospital like Mercy, a terrific hospital, and no ambulatory doesn't substitute for emergency care, for getting your mammogram done, for getting your other hospital-based procedures done. So it perpetuates structural racism that disadvantages Black communities and Black people, rich, poor, and otherwise, compared to those in advantaged communities, which tend to be wealthier communities and white communities. So it's really unacceptable for that Mercy is closing.
Okay, a lot to think about there. My thanks to Dr. David Ansel and Deborah Harris for joining us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Still to come on Chicago Tonight, a top Illinois Democrat dismisses fears of vote-by-mail fraud and calls for more support for the Postal Service. After the Chicago Teachers Union demands an all-remote learning plan for the fall, CPS says yes. Alderman weigh in.
Mayor Lightfoot is now part of Black Chicago history.
How a new mural featuring Mayor Lightfoot is brightening a Southside neighborhood. A Chicago banding station is flying to the rescue for North America's birds. And a local musician plays for time while his father makes handcrafted instruments. But first, some of today's top stories. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is warning Southern Illinois residents that the spread of COVID-19 is worse in their region than anywhere else in the state.
The COVID-19 pandemic, which once seemed tame in Carbondale and throughout the entire region, is now surging here. It's worse than in Chicago. And I'll be frank, if we don't see some change here, the virus will cause some businesses to close and an increasing percentage of people to get sick, and some will even die.
Pritzker spoke today in Carbondale in Jackson County, one of the 11 downstate counties the Illinois Department of Public Health considers to be at a warning level for an increase in COVID-19. This as Illinois as a whole today reports more than 1,400 new cases of the virus, bringing the total to nearly 185,000. The state is also reporting 19 additional deaths from the virus for a total of just over 7,500. Today's numbers bring Illinois' 7-day preliminary positivity rate to 3.9%. And the family and friends of 17-year-old Caleb Reed gathered today to remember the life of the young activist shot and killed over the weekend. Reed was shot last week in West Rogers Park on Chicago's north side. He was pronounced dead on Sunday. Chicago police say they have no new information to release about the investigation into the shooting. Reed had been a leading voice in the movement to remove police officers from Chicago public schools, inspired by an incident where he was detained by a school police officer because he didn't have his student ID with him. Sixth Ward Alderman Roderick Sawyer says Reed's story inspired him to advocate for the removal of officers from schools.
I was asked to participate and author and sponsor an ordinance to get police out of public schools. Yes, sir. I was, and in all honesty, I was a bit hesitant at first, but the story of Caleb Reed was the story that moved me. Once the story was relayed to me first by Maria, then by Caleb himself, that was the tipping point for me to really get involved in this fight.
Now back to Paris and a prominent member of the Illinois congressional delegation. Paris.
Brandis, President Trump repeats his attacks on widespread mail-in voting, claiming without evidence that it will lead to a rigged election. This as the nation struggles to get control of COVID-19 and Congress butts heads over another stimulus package. Meanwhile, $600 supplemental unemployment checks have run out. Joining us to weigh in on these issues and more is Illinois Congresswoman Sherry Bustos, whose Northwestern District includes parts of Rockford and Peoria, as well as the Illinois side of the Quad Cities. Bustos is also the chairwoman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, or DCCC. Congresswoman, thanks for joining us.
You.
Okay, to that $600 supplemental unemployment insurance, should the unemployed feel confident that Congress will come to an agreement to re-up those benefits?
I think, well, they can feel confident that House Democrats got the job done 11 weeks ago now. That is how long it's been since we passed what we call the HEROES Act. And if you'll remember at the time, Mitch McConnell, who leads the Senate Republicans, said he was going to just take a pause. And in those 11 weeks, he has been unable to get anything put together to present to us to make a compromise, even that we can send something to President Trump to get signed into law. So not only do we have the $600 additional unemployment insurance, which so many families desperately need, we also have the money that goes to the state and local governments. And you can talk to any mayor, any village president, any governor in this country, and they will tell you they are desperate for us to help them so they can pay their firefighters, their police officers, make sure that the hospitals that they help fund and the clinics that they help fund, that they have the resources to do that.
And we know
all of the heroes.
We know that the Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and House Speaker Pelosi are meeting on this. What are the areas that Democrats and Republicans are apart right now?
Well, I was on a call yesterday with Speaker Pelosi and our leadership team, where we are still miles apart on the unemployment insurance. They want to cut the unemployment insurance benefits by $400 per week. Again, our families, they cannot survive this way. They cannot pay their bills. And get this, the compromise on the $900+ billion that we have for state and local governments, the Senate Republicans' compromise on that is zero. So it's not even a real offer. They're not even coming to the table in a way that's going to lead to something that we can get past sooner rather than later. When Mitch McConnell took this pause, our families weren't taking a pause. The state government wasn't taking a pause. Our cities and our towns weren't taking a pause. And there really is a sense of urgency around us.
And clearly there's a wide gulf. I want to move to the issue of mail-in balloting. President Trump has tweeted a lot about it. Here's his most recent comments about how he believes that it will lead to a rigged election.
This is going to be the greatest election disaster in history. And by the way, you guys like to talk about Russia and China and other places. They'll be able to forge ballots. They'll forge them. They'll do whatever they have to do. People should go and they should vote or do an absentee ballot.
Most of these are unfounded claims disputed by local election authorities and even members of the intelligence community. What effect do these comments have on the election or perhaps on acceptance of the results of the election?
Well, President Trump is doing what he does best, which is instill fear in people, to instill doubt in people. All we have to do is look at states like Oregon, states like Washington, Hawaii, Colorado, who have all done vote-by-mail elections for many, many years. Not to mention our men and women who serve in uniform who have voted by mail for scores of years. So it's just his way to add a sense of skepticism to our election process. Now, what we do have to be concerned about is we have money, again, in our HEROES package for the U.S. Postal Service to make sure that they can manage a huge number of ballots that will be mailed out and then will have to be mailed back in. The other thing, we are operating in the middle of a pandemic. We have to make sure that we have the resources, the poll watchers, those who can work on election day. You still have to have vote in person. You still have to have early voting. And so we have to come together on that, Democrats, Republicans, our state governments, our county governments, and make sure that the resources, the personnel are there, and that again, the money in the HEROES package for the Postal Service is absolutely critically important to vote by mail, something we will have to do in the middle of this pandemic.
I want to get back to that, but I want to hear from your colleague, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, a Republican from Western Illinois, on his concerns about mail-in balloting.
I mean, you're really opening a can of worms if you can say, if you're down on election day, just send in all the ballots that haven't been filled out and maybe we'll count those. The most important thing for a republic is that people that know their vote counts. If you don't think your vote counts, it's the only time you really have a say in government. That's when you lose faith in institutions.
Congresswoman, you mentioned funding for the USPS. Will there be a bipartisan majority to approve that?
Well, so far you have President Trump is unwilling to give anything additional to the U.S. Postal Service. Unfortunately, the HEROES Act was almost entirely supported only by Democrats, which is really unfortunate. Again, the state and local governments, they don't have a D or R as it pertains to paying their police officers, their firefighters, their doctors, their nurses, et cetera. And as far as what Congressman Kinzinger said, you know, it is a felony. It is a felony to interfere with that process. So I can't think of any campaign that I've ever been associated with, whether it's support of a candidate or our own race, where we would even think about risking doing anything illegal to get ballots together and fill them out. I mean, it's just, again, I don't know why he would play into President Trump's narrative and scare people about this. There is very little fraud. If you look again at those states that have done this for years, there is very little fraud that has ever happened. And providing $0 for this process, as the Republicans have done up to this point, there's real concern over that. We've got a lot of work yet to do.
Congresswoman, I'm sorry. In the minute we have left, I just want to ask you a couple political questions. Are you pushing Senator Tammy Duckworth to be Joe Biden's running mate?
I am pushing all of the women that he is vetting right now. Look, saying Madam Vice President has a wonderful, wonderful ring to it. I love Tammy Duckworth. She is my close friend. I respect her. We were elected in the same year, 2012, and she's obviously advanced in her career. But look, every single person that Joe Biden is vetting right now, there is something good about every single one of them. And I'm very, very happy that here in a week or two, we'll be able to say Madam Vice President nominee. And then after November 3rd, welcome to serving as in elected office, Madam Vice President.
And my thanks to Congresswoman Sherry Bustos. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And an update, since we recorded that conversation with Congresswoman Bustos this afternoon, reports out of Washington say Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has told Republican colleagues he is open to supporting an extension of the now lapsed $600 federal unemployment insurance boost. That is, if President Trump backs it. When a Southside real estate agent decided to commission a mural he hoped would uplift the neighborhood he works to change, he decided to include a prominent Chicago figure that has made history as the first black woman mayor of Chicago. Arts correspondent Angel Ito has the story.
For the first time ever, Mayor Lori Lightfoot is being featured in a mural created in the city she serves.
No matter where you stand with her, you know, with her politics right there, like she's a part of Black Chicago history by default right there. As far as where her policies goes, that's not the conversation of this piece right there. But as far as acknowledging her as being a part of Black Chicago history and culture right there, that's the given, that's the default.
Now, the mural represents the past, present, and future of the city, featuring Mayor Lightfoot, who represents both the present and the future of Chicago.
She's currently what's happening right there. And as a matter of fact, they even have her placed next to Harold Washington. There's a reason behind that. She's the second black mayor of the city of Chicago right there. That means a lot to black people. It just does. It builds morale to see people that look like you winning and making it.
The mural was commissioned by Dream Spots Real Estate, a South Shore firm that wanted to create something to celebrate their 10-year anniversary.
This building sits on a unique angle where you can see it coming from 76 and Jeffrey.
Together, Pradeer Carter and Ramon Static came up with other featured faces that reflect the city's history. In a mix of bright colors, they sit between South Side landmarks like the Chatham Bungalows, the iconic image of the Bronzeville Boys, and children playing basketball at Cabrini Green. But these aren't the only landmarks.
There's a landmark for the neighborhood right there. So both me and Carter, our initiative though was to create a community-based landmark, right? To the likes of which you have the gate on 26th Street for Little Village, the Chinatown gate off Cermak, you know, the Puerto Rican flag over Division. This is the same thing for South Shore.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And if you're interested in checking out the mural for yourself, it's located at the intersection of 76th and Jeffrey, right behind Dream Spots in South Shore. And we're back with two Chicago aldermen on the big news of the day that CPS will revert to online-only learning in the fall. But first, a look at the weather. We're back with more of our conversation with Alderman Jason Irvin and Alderman Andre Vasquez. Chicago Teachers Union held rallies yesterday warning that CPS plans for a hybrid of remote and in-person learning would not be safe. Here is what the union's president had to say.
You cannot go to the beach in the city of Chicago. You cannot drink indoors in the city of Chicago. But they're going to send hundreds of thousands of students into school buildings, hundreds to a building.
As we mentioned earlier, sources are telling WTTW News that the district does plan to announce it will go to all remote learning for the fall. Alderman Vasquez, do you agree with this decision?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm grateful that they came to see the light, because I was concerned that that was not the direction it was going to go in.
Alderman Irvin, is this the right decision to have all remote learning instead of a hybrid of in-person and remote as they had originally announced?
Well, let me say this. I'm somewhat challenged on both ends. I believe that in some communities, when we talk about remote learning, we need devices, we need internet connectivity. So having remote learning without those things are not going to produce the type of success that other communities have. So if we're going to go to remote learning, we need to ensure that every child on the South and West Side has a device to access the necessary work in the Google Classrooms that they were utilizing, and be able to communicate just as counterparts on the North Side are doing. So as long as our children have the devices, and also we have to think about the expansion of some of our programming, like our safe haven programs. But some of our children, they do not have a safe space to learn at home. So we have to think about how are we going to get children to adequately learn in an environment that's going to produce the type of success that we would want to see under a remote learning platform.
Alderman Vasquez, what about those concerns? How does CPS bridge the gap, A, on technology with internet access and personal computing devices, and B, having a safe place for students to go if their home is not safe?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely agree that is a challenge. I think that is why, looking at the problem the way I was viewing it, we should have made that decision a while ago to have the time to adequately find the funding, the resources, and make the adjustments, because none of this is easy at all. Even with school going remote, we're still going to see the problem of parents that have to work and then try to figure out, how are the kids? Because somebody's gonna have to stay home potentially, depending on the age of the children. So there are a lot of variables. Ultimately, the way we have to solve it, as government, is to figure out how much funding we're going to put towards it, so that the people that don't have the internet access, that don't have the devices, that don't have safe spaces to learn, are provided that. And that's why, in my estimation, we should have been talking about this prior, rather than having the short window of trying to figure it out now.
Alderman Irvin, are there parents in your ward that are concerned about having to go to work and having to have someone at home with their kids?
Oh, there's no question about it. I met with a group of ministers last week that were concerned about that very point, and said, hey, we may need to open up our churches for children to come in, to give them a safe environment to learn in. And again, we have parents. These parents have to work. Rent has to be paid. Light bill has to be paid. Food has to be purchased. So we cannot have parents just sitting at home with their children. So we're going to also have to think about the social service safety net that's going to surround this move to remote learning. So again, I'm open for a discussion, but I think that if we expand our safe haven programming that we've been doing with our faith-based organizations and community organizations after school, to some before school time and during school time, to give children a safe space to operate and learn in, I think that's something that we will definitely have to explore, especially in households where people have to work. We can't leave 8-year-old kids at home by themselves all day. We just can't do that.
Certainly, so many difficult decisions that parents have to make right now. Andre Vasquez, you see the numbers for COVID positivity inching up again in Chicago. Are you hearing from business owners that are concerned, especially bars and restaurants in your ward, that might have to shut down, and what that would mean for them?
Oh, I think everyone is fearful. That's part of the reason, a little bit to kind of what you were talking before. Had the schools open and there was more opportunity for congregation and mixing, I think we could have seen even a faster climb of those cases. So everyone's concerned. The businesses are concerned. I think we all have to think about what our society is going to look like going forward. And what I try to get across to people, whether it's business owners or neighbors, is that there really isn't a back to normal. Like it's about what adjustments we make going forward, so that we can figure out a way to responsibly move forward. And it's going to have large effect on communities, on business communities, and everyone. And it's our job to figure out how to make it as stable as possible and make the adjustments so that people aren't abandoned.
All right. My thanks to Alderman Jason Irvin and Alderman Andre Vasquez. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Thanks, Paris. Chicago is flying to the rescue. That is, with a new bird banding station at Big Marsh Park on the city's far south side. That's where researchers are hoping to get a better sense of North American birds. Joining us with more details about bird banding is WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley. Welcome back, Patty.
Hey, Brandis.
So what research is done at these bird banding stations?
You know, there's a lot of different types of research that can be done using bird banding. This specific project is related to the survivability and productivity, which means kind of the reproductive activity of a very specific set of land-based smallish birds, kind of in the songbird class.
And so what kind of data do these researchers collect here?
So they're looking to see, are we seeing the same birds coming back to this space year after year in the Big Marsh area, but also are we seeing too many adult birds, meaning we're not seeing them reproduce, a lot of younger birds, or by the same token, are we not seeing some birds coming back, which means that they're not surviving their migration, or maybe this habitat isn't really as hospitable to them as we might think it is. Like the researchers are saying, we know that there's a lot of birds here, but if you're not banding them and tracking them, you don't know if the bird that you're seeing this year is the same one that you saw last year and the year before and the year before. So birds could be flying over Chicago thinking, hey, that looks like a great spot. And then they're like, this was awful, and they don't come back next year. And we don't know that if we're not tracking which birds exactly are showing up. So a lot of interesting stuff can be gathered.
A lot of interesting stuff, yeah. Sounds like a long-term flight path there. Patty Wetley.
Long-winded, long-term project.
Thank you so much for joining us as always.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website. That's at WTTW.com/news. 2020 was supposed to be the year of Chicago music. Then the vast and vibrant local music scene went mostly virtual. In April, we checked in with a Chicago family that plays guitars and can make them too. Here's arts producer Mark Vitale with another look.
Obviously, it's very strange feeling to completely stop playing in clubs and concert halls for the first time. You know, I prefer live audiences. I prefer being in a real crowd, and this is where my music was crafted. And so we'll have to be patient and just wait, and we'll get back to normal at some point.
Goran Ivanovic plays classical guitar without borders, from his own Balkan roots to the Pakistani and Chilean influences of his frequent musical partner, Fareed Haq. This day, Fareed stayed home with his family. Goran met us in a park in Noble Square and played a pair of new, still untitled songs. He talked about one of his final shows in Wisconsin.
I remember we did a show maybe like 3 weeks ago, and what's normally a sellout in Madison, and maybe 10, 15 people showed up, and we were like, okay, this is getting serious.
For Goran Ivanovic, music doesn't just run in the family, it is the family business. At Donche Guitar Company in Forest Park, Goran's brother Mickey works with their father, Donche. The family dog, Bucky, keeps them company. Donche Ivanovic doesn't just repair guitars, he makes these beautiful instruments. These days, he has time to finish a few of his new creations.
I have let's say part-time vacation. In vacation time, I spend time what I want to do, that finish my guitars. I came from former Yugoslavia. The war started in 1991. My wife and me, we was mixed marriage. That's mean Croatian, Serbian, and was not our war. We just escaped.
my father mostly a blues and a rock musician, and you know, I've studied classical music and, you know, all sorts of different Balkan folk styles. So I love what he does. He's able to just brings joy to the community.
I have job who is best job in the world, you know. Put me in China, I will enjoy it.
Now more than ever, we realize how much we depend on the family and friends. You know, it's only been like 3 weeks in a lockdown, and all we keep talking is who we are going to invite to our house for dinner when this is over.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
Goran Ivanovic and Fareed Haq have a new recording on Chicago's Delmark Records, and they've just announced some of their first live performances in months. They play at Hey Nani in Arlington Heights on Sunday, and they just announced a show at Space in Evanston next month. Find out more and experience more of Goran's guitar playing on our website. And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7.
Debating whether to change the history curriculum in Illinois schools.
And inside the Chicago workshop of the artists who made the haunting trailer for Candyman. Before we go, yesterday, a leading light of the Chicago folk music scene died. Michael Smith was 78. We remember him with a performance he made in this studio in 2009. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
Michael Smith, one of the all-time best, and I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and good night.
The turning of the planets in their appointed rounds, the timing of the universal clock's slow winding down, the last blue star of morning to greet the risen sun. Every sense and mind agrees, an artist lives in all of these, one who knows intrinsically such things are finely done, such things are finely done. The forest turns to summer for a billion shades of green as the sea turns to the sunlight.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.
Every sense and mind agree.